A study of more than 5 million Swedish men and women suggests that the taller you are, the greater your risk of cancer, which is, of course, terrible news for those of us on the taller end of the scale.
Joining us on the Kogo News Live line, Dr. Russell Skinner, who uses genetic mapping to treat his patients. And Doctor, what's the science behind this study? Kind of give us a rundown of this.
Basically, this study looked at 5 million Swedish men and women born after 1930. They began following them in adulthood, so beginning about 1958, and followed them through 2011. And they looked at those people over that time period, height, and then also whether or not they did, in fact, develop a cancer, and if so, which, and compared that to kind of normal risk for general population. And sure enough, found that those with every 4 inches of additional height, they had an increased risk of about 18% for women, about 11% for men of developing a cancer.
Okay, so is there an association? Did this study find an association between height and cancer? So if you are tall, it causes cancer, or where's the correlation?
It is simply an association. It does not show that being tall causes cancer. It just shows an association between being tall and your risk of developing a cancer. And the question really is, why is that? Is it, there's a couple of theories. One is just that larger people have more cells in their body. Each cell has the potential to mutate into a cancer. So if you have more of them, you have more chances. The other is there something that these patients were exposed to during childhood and adolescence that caused them to grow taller? And did that same exposure now give them a risk of developing a cancer in adulthood? Those are the questions that remain to be answered.
And when you say tall, I mean, let's get really specific here. What do they define as tall?
6 feet and over.
Okay, 6 feet and over. So they looked at height, but couldn't you kind of do the same thing for, I mean, it seems like you could say, all right, somebody with bigger hands or bigger feet or longer legs. I mean, it just seems like there could be a correlation between anything.
You know, that's a good question, a good observation. Obviously, this study particularly was looking at height and whether or not anyone ever was wanting to do a study looking at any of those other factors. You're right. There's a potential that they would show a correlation. In this case, with 5.5 million people followed over that particular length of time, that you can't just look at that and say it's nothing but coincidence. It's too many people followed over too long a period. So the statistics are significant. Obviously, this study hasn't been published yet, and it's going to be presented later this month as far as the findings. One of the things about this, and it points to this fact, is that, genes do play a role. Genes do matter as far as our health, and understanding that and being able to test for and utilize that information is something that's relatively new, but nonetheless is really worthwhile to do. I know in my practice we use genetic testing and DNA testing to determine what medications may work better for someone, what medications should be avoided, what diet will work best for someone, what exercise they respond best to. And that's something we didn't have available to us, 10 years ago.
Well, that was going to be my next point is these tall people, is it possible that the majority of them or all of them had an unhealthy lifestyle, an unhealthy diet, didn't exercise? Were there environmental factors involved? Or would that be too much of a coincidence to have all these tall people be exposed to the same stuff?
That would probably be too much coincidence. If it were a small group, if we were looking at 500 people, then obviously their individual lifestyle choices might play a significant role. When you're looking at 5.5 million people followed over 50 years, you can think about think of the United States here. What has changed in people's lifestyle over 50 years? Our diet's different. Our amount of activity is different. Toxin exposures are different over that period of time. And to see the same sorts of results for someone born, late in the 20th century versus mid 20th century over this number of people, it's more than just coincidence.
All right, that's Dr. Russell Skinner. Doc, thanks so much for your time. Dr. Skinner uses genetic mapping to treat his patients, talking about this. This is actually one of those studies where it is so large that you can't discount the correlation, but then trying to figure out why taller people have a higher chance of cancer is the next step.
The point that he made about they have more cells in their body, that's what really, piqued my interest.
Of course.
Yeah.